Hey guys, welcome to this session on JavaScript Roadmap by Intellipaat. In this session, we'll take a look at how you can learn JavaScript and become proficient in certain technologies so that you can build JavaScript applications and get a job. JavaScript is by far one of the most popular languages right now. It can be used to build applications for several kinds or for several platforms, and because of this reason, it could be a little difficult to know how to get started and which paths to follow. Keeping that in mind, we've come up with this session to help you get started with the JavaScript roadmap so that you can learn what are the technologies that you should learn in order to attain success in a particular stream in JavaScript application developer's career. Let's take a look at the agenda, but before we begin, we'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel, click on the notification bell icon so that you never miss another update, and if you have any questions during the entire presentation, please put them in the question box. Our team is there to help you out. And if you have any problems regarding what the technologies we are discussing in this presentation, don't worry. At the end of the presentation, we'll get you through some of the resources through which you can learn these things. So with that, let's get started and let's take a look at the agenda. We begin by taking a look at what is JavaScript. We'll then move on to take a look at why you should use JavaScript. Then we'll take a look at the average salary of a JavaScript developer. We'll then move on to take a look at companies that are hiring JavaScript developers. And finally, we'll take a look at JavaScript roadmap. So what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a high-level object-oriented scripting language which can be used to build front-end, back-end, and mobile applications. Now, these aren't the only kinds of applications that can be built using JavaScript. You can also build desktop applications and many other kinds of applications as well, but these are the most popular use cases. Now, JavaScript is a high-level language mainly because you don't have to deal with the low-level memory stuff. All of that is taken care of by JavaScript itself. So when you create new objects in memory and then those objects need to be removed from the memory, JavaScript's garbage collector will take a look at the memory from time to time periodically and will figure out what are the objects that can be removed from the memory and will do so in a safe manner so that your application doesn't crash and the memory doesn't get corrupted as well. Then you have object-oriented. JavaScript is an object-oriented language. Although when JavaScript began, writing object-oriented code in it could have been really difficult, but nowadays with new language features such as ECMAScript 6, which we'll discuss in the session, making object-oriented programs and writing object-oriented code has become really easy. It is a scripting language, which means that the scripting language and then the programming language. Although JavaScript is quickly blurring the lines between scripting and programming languages, the basic idea behind scripting languages is that they, instead of creating an application, what you can do is you can write some code in it and it will instruct certain applications to behave in certain way, or it can be used to perform certain tasks on certain platforms. The reason why it's called a scripting language is because JavaScript, when it began, was only used in the web browser. So it was called a scripting language because you could write code that will tell browser how to run the web page that's being displayed on the screen and what are the interactions that need to be taken care of and how, and all of that will be taken care of by JavaScript. So this is why it was called a scripting language when it began. However, nowadays it's strictly speaking true because now you can use JavaScript to build several kinds of applications ranging from web servers, front-end applications, or mobile applications, desktop applications, and many other things. So let's take a look at why you should use JavaScript. So JavaScript has several advantages. Let's take a look at them one by one. First one is easy to learn. JavaScript is so popular because it's one of the easiest languages to pick up and learn. You can learn JavaScript quite easily. If you spend just a few weeks in order to get the basic syntax under your belt, if you've never written any line of code, you can still get started with it quite easily. Depending on how you want to progress in your career, what are the kinds of applications you wish to build, there are different technologies for you to use, but the basics are quite easy for you to grasp. So that's why JavaScript is so easy to learn and so popular nowadays. Then there's cross-platform. Cross-platform basically means that if you have some JavaScript code, you don't have to worry about it not being able to run on a particular platform, such as Linux or Windows or Macintosh OS. The reason why that is because JavaScript is designed to be working on these platforms seamlessly. Although there might be some sort of things that you might need to take care of when you're dealing with different platforms, for the most part, it's going to work the same. So if you're trying to get to a particular file, the directory structure of Linux and Windows is quite different. So in cases like this, you do need to account for the platform differences, but for most of the cases, it's fine. You don't need to worry about those at all. And there's large community. JavaScript developers enjoy the luxury of having a really huge community of developers. Apart from having large community of developers, JavaScript developers also contribute largely into the community projects. The reason why having large number of developers is quite useful is because when you have a large number of developers in your community, there are several problems that have already been solved by those developers because they have faced it before you have even begun writing code. Also, many tools have been developed to ease your way into the language. Many documentations have been written, several Stack Overflow posts, several blog posts, and many new tools have been created in order to solve some of the issues that the language itself had. And because of the large community, large number of open source projects and libraries have taken shape so that instead of you having to start from complete scratch, you can write applications on top of the packages that have already been created that solve these common and mundane problems. Then comes tooling. So tooling is another major aspect when it comes to starting with a particular programming or scripting language. Tooling basically allows us to uh, write and run our code. It makes it really easy. Although JavaScript is just code, that means that you can write it in Notepad if you wish to. But in order to have a productive developer experience, you need some features in the editor or the IDE in which you're writing the code. These features include linting, code check, writing code in with syntax highlighting, or code completion, auto completion, and many other things like this. So since JavaScript has been around for quite some time, it is a language that is supported by several IDEs that are available, ranging from open source IDEs such as Eclipse to enterprise IDEs such as Visual Studio Professional. So you can, these are available by default in some languages, but what you can also have is languages and IDEs that don't have the support initially, but you can download and install certain plugins and packages, and they'll do the trick for you. Even some code editors have been written using JavaScript. For example, Visual Studio Code and GitHub's Atom code editors have been written by JavaScript so that you can take a look at those. They have been written in JavaScript, they have been compiled and run and deployed using JavaScript. So it's completely JavaScript based stack. So you can take a look at those tools source code. They are open source so that you can understand how you can build your own text editors as well. That's the advantage of having good tooling, that you can be much more productive and can make changes to your code with much more confidence. Now let's take a look at the average salary of a JavaScript developer. The average salary that we're going to be discussing is going to be the salary of a developer that is influenced also by a lot of different kinds of things, such as the place that they work in, their experience level, the kind of work that they do, the company that they work in, and so on and so forth. But the average salary in the US is 102,000 US dollars. In India, it's 9.25 lakhs per annum of Indian rupees. In the UK, it's 78,000 pounds. So as you can see that there are different kinds of packages available depending on where you are. Also, these packages are influenced by your experience, the technologies that you know and use, how do you use those technologies, and many other kinds of things as well. Take a look at the companies that are hiring JavaScript developers. So these companies range from multinational corporations that are product based to service based to startups to many other kinds of companies. As you can see that the list is quite big, and these are just a small subset of the companies that are looking for JavaScript developers. So as you can see, Fractal Labs, IBM, Mu Sigma, Amazon, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Evernote, Google, Ola, Siemens, Oracle, and many other companies as well are looking for JavaScript developers. So you can take a look at that as well. Now let's take a look at JavaScript roadmap. A roadmap basically means that a roadmap is there for you so that you can explore different career paths and figure out which one suits your needs the best. It doesn't necessarily mean that these are the only career paths available. Maybe some new ones might come along, but the most popular ones are these, and you can take a look at what are the technologies that you can learn in order to follow a specific career path. So JavaScript can be used to build different kinds of applications. Let's take a look at them one by one. We need to learn the basic application development. This is the pure basics, which are the JavaScript language features, such as writing code for manipulating buttons and all of that in a web page and embedding it inside a web page. This is how JavaScript started out, and this is really important, and this can also get you a job. So if you learn the basics, you are well on your way. Then there's front-end. Front-end application development is also quite a good job category. But what are the technologies that you need to learn, and what are the technologies that you need to understand thoroughly in order to get a job? We'll discuss those. Then we'll take a look at backend. Backend basically means server side, in which you have to deal with how the data is coming to you, how you can request the data, how you can extract data from a request, what are the operations that you need to perform with that data, and so on and so forth. And then comes mobile applications. As we have discussed, that you can build mobile applications for multiple platforms in JavaScript or using JavaScript. So how do you do that, and how does it work? We'll take a look at all of that in a moment. First, let's take a look at JavaScript basics. So firstly, we need to get comfortable with the JavaScript syntax and language features. To begin a career in a particular language, you need to first get comfortable with the syntax and the language features. First one is the programming construct. So JavaScript uses very much like the C language syntax. It's inspired by the C language. So if you have ever written code in C, Java, C++, C#, or any language that is inspired by the C language, you should take a look at the syntax and you can compare them, and you'll find several similarities. So if you know one of the C inspired languages, then jumping on to JavaScript is not going to be very difficult. Then comes ES6 syntax. ES6 stands for ECMAScript 2015. Although it is the 6th version, it was released in 2015, and it brought with it a few features and few language enhancements and syntax enhancements that have made using JavaScript much easier. Before these, the JavaScript language lacked certain clarity. There were certain kinds of things that you had to sort of do in a way that is not very readable, and that made your code look really ugly and muddled. But nowadays you can write code in ES6 syntax that makes it really readable and really easy to parse. Then comes object-oriented programming. In case you have been developing applications for any amount of time, object-oriented programming is one of the most popular ways of building programs. Object-oriented programming basically means that you model your applications in terms of classes and objects, how those classes and objects interact with each other, you link them together, and you form an object graph through which your program is going to run, and it's going to pass messages among the objects to get certain tasks done. As mentioned before ES6, creating objects and classes in JavaScript was a very complicated task, even if you came from languages such as Java and JavaScript, because class was not really something that JavaScript understood. So in cases like these, we had to use some tricks, such as using functions and then adding it to the prototype of the functions for inheritance, and there were a lot of weird quirks that we had to deal with. Nowadays, they are quite similar to object-oriented programming like Java and C++. They are implemented the same way they were earlier, but this is just syntactic sugar, a different way of writing the code and much easier to understand. So these are the basic JavaScript things that you need to learn, and language features that you have to understand in order to get started or to get even a junior level position in any company. So as we have already discussed this, let's move on to take a look at front-end. So front-end is also known as the client side. It is the part of the web application that the user interacts with. If you have ever loaded a web application in your mobile web browser, you have taken a look at the front-end. It contains images, text, colors, input boxes, and many other visual elements that you as a client can use. That's why it's called the client side, because it's delivered on the client, which is your mobile phone. So how can you learn these things? Well, first thing you have to learn is a front-end framework. In case you're unaware, front-end frameworks are basically frameworks that use JavaScript entirely in order to build the front end. So the languages that is used is JavaScript, but the kinds of frameworks that you can use is React.js, AngularJS, Vue.js. Learn one framework. You don't need to learn all of those. Although we would recommend that you take a look at all of these languages, take a look at all the frameworks, figure out which one suits your needs the best, and then using that framework, you can build applications that are for the front end of an application, front end of a JavaScript based application. Then comes build tools. Now, build tools are quite important to learn once you start learning frameworks. Job of a build tool is to basically take your several assets and compile them together into a single file. So to give you an example, when you're building a JavaScript application, you get multiple files in order to separate your code in a very nice fashion. But when it comes to deploying your application to the user, you have to just send a single file. The reason, because if you send multiple files, then the problem becomes that your web browser would have to make multiple requests. Such as if you have 10 files, then instead of just getting the HTML page and the JavaScript file, it has to get the first HTML page, then the 10 JavaScript files, the total 11 requests per page. And since that is the problem, every new you can think of it as every new request that comes in, that is every user that visits your system, will have to make 11 requests just to make your page usable. So that's a really long time. So you can use build tools for that. That's not all though. Build tools are also used to compile things or transpile things. So if you want to add features in your JavaScript language, you can use things like TypeScript, CoffeeScript, and these are just languages that when you write them, then they can be transpiled into JavaScript, and then JavaScript will be the language that will be running in the web browser. Also for CSS, if you want to combine multiple CSS files, if you want to uglify them, minify them, all of that can be done using several build options, and you need to understand build tools for this. Some popular build tools for those are Gulp, Grunt, and Brunch.js. So these are available. Then there's module bundlers. In case you're not understanding what module bundlers are, in simple terms, with ES6, JavaScript became more modular. In other words, what you can do now is instead of creating multiple files, you can create files, and those files will contain modules. Modules are basically small chunks of JavaScript code bases, and each module deals with separate problems to solve. So for instance, you could have a module for database interaction, one module for local storage, one module for HTTP interaction, one module for user interface, and many other kinds of tasks as well. So this is what module bundlers do. They take the entire code base, all the modules, and then combine it together into one file. So that's the thing that module bundlers are really good at. So now that we've taken a look at front-end frameworks, build tools, and module bundlers, let's take a look at the backend. Backend, in case you are not aware, is the part of the web applications that is known as server side. So when you are using HTTP requests to get a server, when you type in a URL, what happens is the request goes to a web server. Once the web server receives the request, it generates it in HTML page dynamically by taking a look at the templates available and gets data from the database, puts them into an HTML page where the spaces have been defined to put some data, generates a page dynamically, and then sends it over the wire so that the browser can display it. Now, the reason why server side is so important part for web application is because once you get a web application, you need some place to store the data from the user. The front end of the application is good only for sending requests back to the server. It needs to capture the data that the user wants for us to save, such as the username and password, so that we can identify and authenticate them. Then their images, pictures, likes, subscriber counts, and many other kinds of things. So that's why we use a web server. Now, these web servers could be implemented in several languages. JavaScript has a language of its own, or has a platform of its own, that allows us to write JavaScript, which was intended for the front end but can now be used to write backend applications as well. So that's why we use backend applications. Now, how do you build backend applications? Well, you need some web server software and some data store. Data store is not really necessary in some cases, but in most applications, you need some place where you need to store some data. It's usually a database that stores data for which we can extract relationships and get data back to the user. Now, let's take a look at how we can build it. First thing is Node.js, then comes backend frameworks, then comes database. So Node.js is the JavaScript runtime that allows us to write code which will run on the web server and will keep running and intercept requests and send back response. Now let's try and understand what it actually is. So what Node.js allows us to do is it allows us to write code that will it basically allows us to write JavaScript code in JavaScript, which can be used to build a web server that will intercept a request and send back a response. Now, Node.js isn't pure JavaScript because it doesn't mean that you can get JavaScript from the front end and then copy it and paste it in the Node.js environment and it will work just fine. There are certain platform differences, such as when you're building an application in iOS and Android, there are certain platform differences, so you can't just copy and paste code or just convert code from one language to another language and it will work. So that is one of the reasons. But Node.js is using JavaScript syntax, so it's quite easy for developers who are on the front end to move to the back end. Also, one other thing, Node.js isn't completely JavaScript. What it does is that it runs the Chrome's V8 engine, which is written in C++. So your code will interact with that engine and that engine will interact with the underlying hardware to make things happen. So don't worry about that. Once you learn Node.js and get comfortable with it, then comes backend framework. Frameworks allow you to take your mind off the low level details of how to get the request, how to parse a request, how to set up the web server, how to get the data and many other kinds of things. Instead, it allows you to focus on things that you needed to focus on, such as how to solve the business problems, how to manipulate the data, transform the data, and how to send it back to the data store, and many other kinds of problems that you are trying to solve. The business problems as they're called. So some of the most popular backend frameworks are Express.js, Happy.js, Koa.js, and many others are available as well. So you can use the backend frameworks to create and generate JSON data, or can generate HTML content on itself and then send it back to the server, send it back to the client, depending on how you want your application to be structured. Then comes database. A database is a data store. You need to learn one kind of database technology, such as an SQL or a NoSQL database. Now, an SQL database allows you to build your application data store in a tabular format. You can create tables with rows and columns, where each column might be containing some data that is isolated in that table, or it referencing some other data that is in some other table. Modeling the data like this can be a little difficult at times, but it can be really easy once you get the hang of it. On the other hand, NoSQL databases are used when you don't know the shape of your data. Think of when you're trying to collect data for a country's census. Some fields might not apply to some people and other fields might. So the shape of your data might be missing some columns. You need to add some more columns and many other kinds of things like that. In cases like that, NoSQL databases such as MongoDB and Neo4j and databases like that can be really helpful. So you can learn one kind of database and then learn how to integrate it with the backend framework and Node.js itself. Then comes mobile applications. So JavaScript can be used to build mobile applications for multiple platforms such as iOS, Android, etc. It is possible to write JavaScript code that will create applications for both of these platforms in just one single code base, where you don't have to write code for iOS, you don't have to write for Android, you don't have to write for other applications platforms as well. To think about it this way. When you're writing code, one thing that you have to understand is that when you are trying to build a mobile applications, many companies, what used to happen is they had separate teams of multiple developers for these platforms. They were dedicated to work on these platforms. So you had an Android development team, you had an iOS development team, you had a Windows development team, and all of these worked separately. There were a lot of developers trying to build essentially the same features but out for different platforms. Using JavaScript, what they now could achieve is that they could just write the code, and that code can then be converted and used to build applications for multiple platforms on itself. So one single code base, a small team, and that's all they needed. So let's take a look at what are the different kinds of applications that you can build. The first one is hybrid mobile applications, and the second one is native mobile applications. Hybrid mobile applications are applications that take a look at the web view. In most of the applications that are built with hybrid mobile applications, they make use of a technology called native web view. Basically, what it does is that it takes your JavaScript based HTML and front-end application and then wraps it inside a native container. So now instead of having a browser with the browser bar where you can type in the URL and the toolbar that is underneath, all you have to do now is just open it up and it will open up the page, but you won't get the full browser experience. You will just get the page. So that's the native hybrid approach, which uses WebView. A common example of this is the Amazon's mobile application in Android. It used to use WebView. I don't know if it does still, but it used to make heavy use of WebViews. Then comes native mobile applications. So native applications are quite a bit faster than hybrid applications. If you just want to deliver some content on your mobile applications and want it to be easily available to your users, then using hybrid mobile apps is quite a good choice. But if you want performance, speed, you want animations in your web browser that are not lagging and jittery, then use native mobile applications. So to build hybrid applications, you can use technologies such as Apache's Cordova, or there are many other technologies such as Ionic. You can use those. But if you want to build native mobile applications, then you can use React Native or Native Script, and these languages allow you to use build native mobile applications using JavaScript. All of these use JavaScript, and you can use your front-end framework skills and your back-end framework skills along with these mobile applications in order to build a cohesive ecosystem of applications which can be used to build these good services. So now that we've come to the end of the session, thank you so much for joining me. Now let's explore some of the resources through which you can learn these things. Whenever I'm trying to learn something new, a quote that always helps out is, an investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. Keeping that in mind, if you wish to have your questions answered when you're trying to learn something new and you run into a problem and you wish to get the question answered in that regard, then you can take a look at our community site, which is intellipaat.com/community, on which you can ask your questions, provide as much details as possible, and like-minded people such as your peers will help you out there. And you can answer other people's questions. Then comes blog. We have a blog site that is intellipaat.com/blog, in which we publish content regularly, where we help you get started with technologies, where we post tutorials that you can follow in order to build small applications and get comfortable with certain languages. So these are all on intellipaat.com/blog. If you're more of a visual person, then you can take a look at our YouTube channel. We provide a lot of free content there. There are a lot of free courses available for you to take a look at, in which we explain the basics of a particular language, ranging from what the language is about, how the language works underneath the hood, and then how you can get started with building applications. We cover concepts such as cloud computing, machine learning, web development, and many other kinds of things. But in case you are not looking for free courses, but you're looking for certification, you're looking to upskill yourself to get ahead in your career, let me point you through another resource. On Intellipaat.com, we have a certification for full stack web development accredited by Electronics and ICT Committee in Guwahati, IIT Guwahati, where you will be in which you will be taught full stack web development with concepts such as HTML, CSS, React, Git, and MVC frameworks, and working with several databases. It's a 9-month course. You get 3 guaranteed interviews, 500 plus hiring partners, and 24/7 lifetime support. This program is available for anyone who wishes to learn full stack development. You can learn skills such as Linux, SQL, MeanStack, Node.js, MongoDB, Python, Django, React.js, and many other full stack frameworks and front-end and backend technologies that entirely encompass the full stack development environment. Once you complete the course, you will get two certifications, one accredited by the IIT Guwahati ICT Academy and one with Intellipaat. And with that, you get 24/7 support, mock interviews, industry grade projects, and minimum 3 exclusive interviews. The program curriculum, you can take a look at this to figure out what are the kinds of things that you will be taught. And the most important aspect here is that you get 7 guided projects to practice. These projects are going to be guided so that if you ever run into any issues when you're learning these technologies, you can simply reach out to us and we can help you out with that. These projects also allow you to put some weight on your resume so that you can, when applying to particular companies, can show that you actually know certain things instead of just showing that you have done particular certifications. You can take a look at the projects, you can take a look at the testimonials as well. You can take a look at the admission details, and if you have any questions, you can take a look at the FAQs first. In case your questions are not answered in the FAQs, let me point you through some contact information through which you can contact us. But before that, thank you so much for joining me. Here's a coupon code that will help you out, will help you get 30% off on any course. This is available for our YouTube viewers for a limited amount of time, so we recommend that you make use of it as quickly as possible because it might not be valid for a long amount of time. So the code is YouTube30. You can just use that code. And with that, thank you so much for joining me. We've come to the end of the session. You can contact us when you wish to learn more about the courses that we have discussed on our website or any other thing. These are the numbers through which you can contact us in India and in the US. If you're more of an email person, drop us a mail at sales@intellipaat.com. Our course advisors are available for you to chat with 24/7. And with that, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.